Hi, my name's Ant Smith. Welcome back to the Where's the Growth podcast. Let's go ahead and dive right in. All right, cool. So this week, I'm going to try to keep it short because I got to have a really good conversation this past week with a good friend of mine who I consider as a mentor figure from my previous employer. And we got to talk for over an hour and a half, and we have not caught up in a good amount of time. So we got to connect this week, and I'll start off by saying this: the conversation was timely, it was needed, it was everything that essentially is in alignment with what I'm trying to do with this podcast, where I'm trying to go with my life, and just overall, it was just everything that needed in the right moment. So we were just sharing ideas on thought processes. He was sharing some insight and tips with me on kind of the podcast, some conferences he had gone through or gone to for some leadership and development. And it was just a really good conversation, very fruitful. And in that conversation, we started talking, and I was telling him, like, hey, we were having a real candid conversation, and we were just talking, and I was like, yo, you know, it's not normal. Like, we're in kind of like the 1% of thinkers in terms of wanting to strive for growth opportunities, wanting to better ourselves, wanting to be self-educated, wanting to continue kind of sharpening that tool set, and not just being complacent with like getting good jobs, making good income, providing a stable life. Like, there's something more to it than just the financial compensation. It's like the work that you do. It's gratifying for like you keep putting work in, keep putting effort in, and to seeing kind of like the fruits of your labor. So we were just talking, and we were talking about like, that mindset of wanting to continue to water the seed and allow it to continue to grow and expand. That mindset is not a common thing. And so I was saying to him, I was like, and that's kind of what prompted this podcast, was like the 99% would be easier for me to not make a podcast, consume other content, and simply just be a consumer and not a producer. But that 1% mentality is really that differentiation between the life I'm living now and the life I aspire to live, as well as those people that we see in comparing our lives to kind of what their lives look like, right? We all are given the same 24 hours, but it's a matter of how that 24 hours is spent is what indicates the outcomes that we're going to receive. So we had a good hour and a half conversation just simply talking about that mindset and mentality. And I was telling him, like, now verbalizing it to him, I was telling him, like, yeah, like our mindset, our mentality, like we're few and far between in terms of the people that think like us, act like us, have the same intentionality as us. So when we do find other people that fit that mold, that have that same drive, that are wired this way, we have to encourage them, uplift them, make sure that we continue feeding them the same way that they'll feed us, because we're in such a minority of people that even operate under this programming, I'll say, for lack of better words. When you find others who connect and resonate on that level, we tend to gravitate to them, hold on to them, because it's not easy to find a connection that's at that capacity, that's at that extreme, where people are on that same wavelength. And what this can look like, right, because I see it in my personal and professional life, what this can look like is just simply what you see as normal in terms of your input. That is not normal for everyone. So you may hold yourself to a certain standard and a certain level of excellence that not everyone holds themselves accountable to. And as humans, we can't put that expectation on others to operate in the same manner that we operate in. And that's why when you find people who move at the same degree that you move at, and who have the same ambitions and same drive and motivations that you have to make sure that you continue to maintain that relationship and cultivate that network, because your network is your net worth. And if you are surrounding yourself by people who are going to continue to push you, mold you, grow you, continue to help you elevate, then you, as a byproduct of simply just being in that environment, are going to elevate by default. So as we were talking, he said something that really challenged me. He was saying, I love what you said about us being in that 1% of simple mentality, right? But how do we turn that 1% to 2%? And that question really stumped me in the moment. And I had a conversation with my girlfriend earlier in the week, and we were talking about the difference between men and women, and how, completely off topic but still relevant, men if there is a table full with 5 chairs, men will typically bring, and there are 2 people that are trying to join that table, men will bring in chairs and add chairs to the table to make room for the other 2 individuals to join. So going from 5 seats to 7 seats. Women, however, have the mentality of, if there are only 5 seats, that means 2 people got to go. Women have this competitive nature amongst other women, which I found was super interesting to hear from a woman's perspective. Women have this unspoken competition within each other to not elevate them in that same way, to not pull up a chair, but to find out who needs to be let go, who needs to be cut. And it was just so interesting talking about, well, how do you, relating it back to my conversation with my good friend, relating it back to the conversation and how do we turn that 1% to 2%, I think it clicked for me too in that moment to not only think of it just on a like micro level of, you know, how do we get more men or more women to think like this, but when I look at it on a big scale, it's like, it's the same saying as you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? That 1% of programming, I will say, in terms of the 99% of people will, you know, just go along and live comfortable and, you know, just not challenge anything, not challenge the status quo, but be comfortable with what the circumstances of life they have, right? And there's neither of which way is better than the other, right? It's all about personal preference, but the 99% will take kind of like the path of least resistance in terms of what's easily attainable, right? What requires least amount of effort or engagement for me. But that 1% is not something that everyone is born with, but it's something that you can cultivate. And it all starts with your habits, what you're choosing to make your habit, what you're choosing to make your norm, what you're choosing to commit to. That's what really dictates and separates that 1% from the 99. And I think if you look at those people who are successful, and you know, success is different for everyone, but when you think about financial stability, when you think about accomplishments, accolades, influence on a broad scale, on a major scale, like true impact where their work doesn't solely impact themselves, but it impacts a greater number of individuals. When you think about the difference between the 99 and that 1% are choosing to use their 24 hours in a way that serves them. Use their 24 hours in a way that has longevity as opposed to short-term success. And we see that in like the Jeff Bezos, we see that in the Steve Jobs, right? Where that 1% of thinking of how can I maximize this 24 hours that I have, and it translates far beyond simply just the professional life. You talk about relationships too, like those individuals who choose to put in the time and the effort to actually learn and understand, learn how to communicate, learn how to listen, learn how to resonate with individuals. You see that, and that's what separates the 1% from the 99% is that use of the 24 hours. And all of this to say is we're all given the same 24 hours. The thing that dictates what your outcome is going to look like at the end of that 24 hours is how you choose to spend that time. Make use of the time that you are able to propel your future, educate yourself, get 1% better. And what's really going to differentiate people is how they choose to use that 24 hours. So what I challenge you to think about is, as you go into this week, how are you planning to use your 24 hours in a way that's going to serve you? Are you happy with the current circumstances of things just kind of being status quo? And, you know, which if you're happy, then I'm happy for you if that's bringing you happiness. But if you're unhappy and you're looking for something more, you're craving for something more, you want something more, I challenge you to really think about how you are spending your 24 hours, because we're all given the same amount of time. And the only thing that differentiates my results, your results, and someone else's results is how we're choosing to spend the 24 hours that we're given. So that's all I got this week. I love y'all. I'll see y'all next week. Stay tuned, and I'm out.